All right, it's just after 2 p.m. We are going to go ahead and get started. Sorry for those technical difficulties. Welcome to our second week of Advanced Kentucky Online Content Review Sessions for AP Computer Science Principles. My name is Aaron Timmons. I'm the Advanced Kentucky Mathematics Content Director. I'm joined by Dr. Sherry McGuffin, our STEM Coordinator, and Monique Rice, who is our Senior Content Director for Computer Science and Mathematics. Also, today's guest speaker is Jackie Honghern from Louisville, Kentucky, so she will introduce herself shortly. Let me go over a few housekeeping procedures here while we go ahead and get started. So disclaimer, this session is intended for a Kentucky audience. Space permitting, though, we welcome students from other areas. We will do all we can to provide every student with an equitable opportunity to learn. However, during this session, while we do encourage participation, anyone causing a disruption to the session will be removed. So please take that accordingly. Our host and contact information can be found here on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions you have. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook. We are happy to help. Your microphones for today will be disabled. Your videos, we ask that you remain off the entire time. Again, turning on videos will cause you to be removed from the session. So please make sure you are adhering to these guidelines. If you have questions, please utilize the chat feature in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. All four of us will be monitoring the chat very actively to answer questions. If you are a teacher, feel free to ask, as well as if you are a student. Again, inappropriate comments, you will be removed. Please make sure you visited our website, kyap2020.com. From here, you can access recordings from our previous sessions, as well as see upcoming events. You can also see resources for both students and teachers. Finally, before we begin, I'm going to pause the recording for about 2 minutes. I'd like you all to open up a new browser. Please go to that link and sign in. Also, make sure you've got Jackie's handouts pulled up from the earlier link. I'm going to pause the recording, give you a second to log in, and we will get started.
And then the last 3 bullets are activities for all of us to do. So you're gonna get a chance to score a sample, also decide on some good computing innovations, and figure out if something's a harmful versus a data concern. All right, so the latest updates from the College Board, specifically for AP Computer Science Principles, there is no longer a multiple choice assessment. The Create and the Explore are the only 2 items that will be graded for potential college credit by the College Board. The due dates have been extended, so it was April 30th and it now has been extended to May 26th. I always let my students know, though, to submit all their tasks about a few days early, and especially because it already has been extended, the College Board is not going to grant any further extensions from that date on. So you might as well make sure you get your tasks in and submitted. As for the weighted values, the Create task is 60% of the grade and the Explore is 40% of the grade. All right, so our first polling question is, it's a true or false question, so it's a 50-50 choice there. The Explore only requires a computing artifact, okay? What do you all think? Okay, I'm gonna give you all a few seconds to do that. Okay. Right. So I'm going to end it. Let's see. As you all can see, a few people said true. The majority said false. And let's see. Sorry, here we go. And that one. The answer to that, though, for the people who said true, I am sorry to disappoint you. The answer is false. The Explorer requires a computational artifact and written responses. So in that sense, that's similar to the Create itself. Both tasks require written responses for explanations. In terms of the the computational artifacts, students can submit either a video, an audio, or a PDF file. As you can see, there are some different types of file formats listed. PDFs, though, however, cannot exceed 3 pages in length. Video or audio files cannot exceed 1 minute in length, nor can they exceed 30 megabytes in size. Okay. In terms of the written responses, students would need to submit written responses in a PDF format with the prompts 2A through 2E clearly labeled in that particular order. Okay. The responses, though, however, the combined responses must not exceed 700 words. The good news on that is that prompt 2E, which is citations and references, that is not included in the final word count. Okay. All right, our next polling question. The Explorer uses a binary system for grading. What do you all think? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and I'm going to share the results with you all. Most of you have said that that is true. A couple have mentioned that it's false. It is, however, the answer is false. Excuse me, that's true. Apologize. Apologize about that. The answer is true on that one. The Explorer PT is graded on whether a criteria is present or absent. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and go a little bit more further into these scoring guidelines just to get you all kind of familiar with it before we start doing our scoring samples. So if you notice, row 1 pulls from the computational artifact itself, and it asks students to identify the innovation itself. In addition to that, it also asks students to either have an illustration or representation or some type of explanation of the innovation's purpose, its function, or its effect on society. Okay, and purpose being kind of basically the goal or the objective of the innovation, and function is how does it consume and produce data. And the computational artifact can receive 1 point or not receive a point. Row 2 pulls from response 2A, and that asks for students to state a fact about the computing innovation's intended purpose or function. Right? And that is also another point on there. If you notice, this is kind of major, but rows 3, 4, and 5 pull from prompt 2C. So in effect, that prompt 2C is the most highly weighted prompt. It can receive or cannot receive 3 out of the 8 points possible. 2C asks students to identify a beneficial and a harmful effect and explain the beneficial and harmful effect. All right, next row, rows 6 and row 7 pull from 2D. So that makes it the second highly weighted value in terms of being able to receive 2 out of 8 points. In that question, students are asked to identify identify data, how data is consumed or it's transformed or produced in a way. In addition, students are also asked to identify a data concern related to the innovation itself. And the last row, which is row 8, that pulls from 2E, the artifact, and the written response. And that's because row 8 is looking at the references. It does require that students do an in-text citation for at least 3 different resources. And what that kind of means is basically, and I have some examples written here on the side where you might be able to start off the sentence saying, according to the New York Times. That's an in-text citation. You can use parentheticals, footnotes, numerical superscripts or subscripts for that matter, to cite your references. Right. And I'm not sure, and that's because I can't see the chat at the moment, but I don't know if you all were wondering what happened to 2B. The question on 2B, it asks that students discuss about how they created the computational artifact. 2B is technically not scored. However, It is used by AP readers to clarify if there were any questions about the artifact or any questions about picking the innovation itself. That can help an AP reader sway an AP reader one way or the other. So it's always definitely a good thing. All right. I'm going to go ahead, just as to recap, kind of basically, what does the Explorer need from students? The students need to submit a computational artifact. Students also need to respond to 4 prompts, 2A through 2D. And lastly, students need to cite their sources from those 2 artifacts before the computational and the prompt and the written responses, and that is found in 2E. Just again, as a reminder, 2E is not included in the 700 the final word count for the 700 words. All right. And then for the next few slides, I am going to be showing you all samples of computational artifacts. So if you can type either a yes or no in chat, deciding whether you think it deserves a point for that artifact or not. And just remember, and I'm going to remind you that in terms of a computational artifact, row 1, the College Board asks that 1, the student identifies the computational innovation, computing innovation. In addition to that, the student has some type of illustration or representation or some type of explanation of the innovation's function, purpose, or impact on society. Okay. All right. So our first one is this one right here. You can write either a yes or no, what you think this particular artifact deserves.
You can also use the yes, no buttons along the bottom of your participant screen too, if you want to just click a button.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah. More features we're using in Zoom. Okay. I see a lot of yeses, actually, from everyone that has put something down. I see a unanimous yes from everyone. And there we go. Oh, awesome. I'm seeing more and more. And that is true. It is a yes. This did receive a 1 on row 1 in terms of the scoring guidelines. This student identified exactly what the innovation is. In addition, right at the top, the student has also given a very brief explanation of the innovation's function itself. All right, good job, everyone. Yay. All right, on to our next one. Okay, what do you all think of this? Does this qualify as a point for the computing and artifact? Okay. Have some no's. Okay, I've got a bunch of no's in there. Great job. Yeah, unfortunately, this one did receive a no. This particular one does not have, well, 1, it does not even identify the computing innovation itself. That being said, I will say a lot of AP readers are pretty lenient when it comes to titling, putting a title on there or not putting, and that's usually because it's accompanied by written responses, and so they eventually do figure out what that innovation is. However, what this artifact does not have, it doesn't have any type of explanation of the function, the purpose, or the impact on society. All right, well, just one more left, just one more. And what about this one? What do you all think? Do you think this one deserves a 1 on the scoring guideline? Okay. And I noticed that Sarah mentioned a no on that one because there is no title. Okay. Lisa's saying no as well. A lot. Okay. Some no's coming through. No. Okay. So far from everyone, it's a no. I will say this, I understand where you all are coming from. However, what it did receive a yes on this one. And the reason being a yes is because even though there is not a title, again, because it was accompanied with written responses, the AP reader can eventually notice that this is about the human genome sequencing. It's and it does have an explanation, a brief explanation of the function and things like that in terms of the human genome sequence. So it does receive a point, but I will let you know that this particular one only received a point for the artifact. The student that submitted this entire thing spoke so much about the features of the human genome sequence, but did not discuss about the data. And so that becomes where the fine line gets drawn. All right, fantastic, everyone. Thank you so much for participating in that. So our next activity is we are gonna look over a sample, all right, a particular sample that a student, go ahead and move that over, and there we go. All right. You all are going to take a look at sample A. This particular sample is a student submission, exactly how the student has uploaded it to the College Board. And so what we're going to do is, once you have had a chance to open these two, and that's in terms of the links and the document, it should be in there. Once you've had a chance to look at these two things, if you can go ahead and complete the scoring sample A Google form, and then we're going to discuss a little bit about what your answers are. Okay, so I'm going to give you all 10 minutes to do that, and I will start our timer now. It's 2:30. Oh, perfect. So at around 2:40, we'll go ahead and get started again. We'll take a look at your results.
And again, those handouts can be found at bit.ly/online CRS. We'll put that in the chat as well.
Thank you.
Say, Jackie.
Yes.
There's a question in the chat. I was told by someone that genetic sequencing is not a computing innovation. Is that true?
Ah, great. Thank you very much. I didn't know if I should verbally say it since everyone was working, but for Sarah, that is a great question. Now, here's the fine line. Genetic sequencing can be a computing innovation as long as what's being discussed is the data itself. However, for instance, sometimes there's the lines can get blurred because sometimes some people will use that and they'll discuss the features of the genome sequencing. For another example could be the fact that, like, if you're going to use a smartwatch, sometimes people discuss the features of those things, but they do not discuss how the data has been inputted, transformed, and then output back again. Okay. So in essence, is genetic sequencing, technically genetic sequencing is a computing innovation as long as the student discusses about the data. However, and this is my big however, is that if there is any type of question about it, I would probably do some more research on what type of data it does use and if there's any kind of publications involved in that. I hope that helps.
I found it helpful.
Thank you. And just to let everyone know, we are at the halfway mark, so you have about 5 minutes left to complete the reading and the form. Okay. We have about 1 minute, 15 seconds left, and just letting everyone know that this is definitely not being graded or anything. I wanted us to be able to look at everyone's comparison and see what everyone is saying. Okay, we are at the end of our time. I'm going to go ahead and update our this next slide so that we can see what everyone else has decided. All right. And okay, not too bad, you all. There are definitely a few people who are saying that rows, maybe possibly row 3, 4, and 5, not receiving scores. Maybe prompt 2C was not the greatest when it came to answering that. A lot of the majority of people are giving a point for almost every single row for this particular submission. If you all will take notice, the little parentheses, the numbers within the parentheses on the left-hand side of this graphic right here, that is actually the point that was given by the College Board. So this student actually received a perfect 8 out of 8. Okay, I only wanted to show is that there is always, there's just room for interpretation. And so when you are writing your responses to all of these questions, make it as obvious as possible. Restate what they're asking, and then explain that. Because again, AP readers are humans just like all of us, and sometimes they'll read it one way and interpret another way. And so that room for interpretation you want to reduce as much as possible. I believe Yolanda asked the question, when citing the sources, are we still using the time for 2 of, yep, yes, exactly. So for our year within 2020, what you're looking for, 2 of your 3 resources should be from the year 2019 and recent. Okay. Great question, thank you. All right, our next part. So next activity is going to be about if something is a good innovation or not, okay? Picking a good computing innovation is probably the most important thing about the Explorer. Again, because if you're not picking the correct one and you start writing about it, it may not be giving you enough the points that you need. And you know, I wouldn't want you all to waste your time when it comes to that. Okay? All right, so our next one, now, when you are doing your decision making about computing innovation, these are the 3 questions that I suggest you ask yourselves, or if you're a teacher, you ask your students to ask themselves. 1, does it use data? Does it input things, transform it, output it to a different way? 2, can I identify a group it impacts, either negatively or positively? And 3, I would say because of the Explorer task itself, it may be one of the more important things. And can I find published references about it? So if you can answer yes to these 3 questions, then likely you have picked a good computing innovation for the Explorer task. Okay. A lot of these are good computing innovations. It's just a matter of kind of honing it down and making sure it's correct for the Explorer task. Okay. I wanted to note down that if something is not a true computing innovation in terms of the Explore task requirements, it really can only receive a point for the entire task, and that again is going to be the computational artifact. Okay? So it's really important that you choose the innovation wisely, and therefore we're going to go ahead and head on into our next activity together. I'm going to give you all about 7 minutes, and there is a list of items that you will see on this Google form. And if you all can decide whether you think this innovation is, whether yes, it's a good innovation, or maybe with some type with like kind of it depends, or not at all, not a good innovation at all. All right, I'm going to start the timer, and we're going to take about 7 minutes to do this. It's 2:44 right now, so around 2:51 we will resume back on together. Okay. I went ahead and updated what everyone had inputted as in the Google form. If you will take a look on this graphic here, the red means that you decided, no, it is not a good computing innovation. Yellow is could, maybe, maybe not, depending, and then green is a yes. All right. Let's discuss the for sure easily enough. Facial recognition software, a system for digitizing and sharing medical records. Everyone unanimously said yes. Those definitely are. Some other ones are depending, and I pulled this out of code.org. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually on the next slide, I'm going to show you all is the key that code.org has. And it may be different from what you mentioned. Okay? But let me go ahead and do that now, and I'll show it to you, and I'll explain a little bit on that one. Great job in terms of the facial recognition software and the medical records. It's a definite yes on those. The others you might be a little surprised on. And here are a couple of reasons. Sometimes a common pitfall is that a student chooses a technological innovation. However, they have not identified the computational aspect of it. Okay? For example, and I wrote down in terms of like a smart cars, self-driving cars. Those it can be a computing innovation, and definitely is a computing innovation. However, it's probably best if the student is going to choose that, they would hone in on something very specific. Possibly, honestly, I don't even know, a sensor, something that censors how somebody is sitting or whatnot, and they would just discuss specifically about that and the data that produces, transform, and things like that. Okay. Sarah, you asked, is autonomous driving a good one? It can be. Again, it's so difficult to say no or yes to anything. The reason why is because if you talk about the data and how that is being used, then autonomous driving can be, yes. Okay. But sometimes, like, some people blur the lines, and I was mentioning before, is like, oh, we want to talk about features of things. Like the 3D printer is one of those, can be a common pitfall. 3D printers are great, and it's definitely a computing innovation, but people tend to talk about features of it. For instance, oh, we can use different types of materials to print with a 3D printer. That, in essence, does not talk about the data. It does talk about a feature of the 3D printer, but not a data factor of it, okay? And so that's why. And so a lot of times, like hardware, if you are discussing anything about hardware, just make sure that you are solely discussing and concentrating on the data itself. But if it's software, just about anything qualifies. Right? Video games, apps, anything in terms of that would definitely qualify as a computing innovation. All right, on to our last activity. When it comes to that, you all are going to get a chance to take a look if something is a harmful effect versus a data concern. Under this definition here, a harmful effect would be something, for instance, what are the unintended consequences of this innovation on specific groups of people, assuming the innovation works as intended. Okay, and that's a big word, as intended. And when it comes to storage concern or data concern, excuse me, what are the risks? How's the data being misused? What are security and privacy risks? All right, this is when spying, hacking, accidental exposure, or invasion of privacy are some good areas to discuss. All right. I am going to give you all about 5 minutes this time, and I'm going to ask that you all fill out the Google form that says data concern. I believe that's what it has. I'm sorry, I got to move some things around on my screen here. Whether it's a harmful effect or a security concern, okay? And this time I'm going to give you all 5 minutes to try to complete that, and then we will take a look at your results again. And I will answer, okay. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Sherry. I'm sorry, I'm just noticing the time, you all. I may have to shave a couple of 1 or 2 minutes off of your time. Trying to get you all out of here on time. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and update our chart. And if you hadn't had a chance to complete it, it's okay. We'll take a look at what others have mentioned on there. All right. So if you'll take notice, some people have mentioned that the blue line is considered something as a data concern or storage or security. The red is indicative of a harmful effect. Okay? Now, there are some that you all have unanimously agreed on, but there are definitely some that are still unsure. Okay, in terms of possibly maybe even like the online advertising. What I've noticed, let's see what else is there. The growing use of facial recognition and music recommendation systems. I'm going to go ahead and show you the next slide. That is the answer key on there. In terms of that, I will discuss in just a moment to why it was considered one way or the other. All right. As for the music recommendation systems, may inadvertently, that's probably one of the major keywords right there is inadvertently direct listeners towards a more narrow selection of music, decreasing the diversity of cultural output and consumption. The inadvertently part, because it is an unintended purpose of, consequences of an intended use. And so that's why it's considered a harmful effect. The next one I'll highlight, the growing use of facial recognition software makes it increasingly challenging to navigate society anonymously. Again, facial recognition, the intended use is a certain way. The unintended consequences of that intended use can make it a challenge to navigate anonymously. All right, so that's why it becomes a harmful effect. Also, the same thing goes for the online advertising is so individualized that we can now operate within our own filter bubbles. Online advertising algorithms use these particular algorithms for an individual's interest, for instance. And so it makes it, unfortunately, forces some people into bubbles and doesn't open their minds or eyes up to some other information, but that is considered a harmful effect. All right, that is in essence the entire thing. I wanted to mention that, so between the harmful effect versus a data concern, most of the answers follow definitions really closely, but there are some nuances, and as a recap, it's a harmful effect if the quote bad thing affects a group of people resulting from the intended use of that innovation. Okay? However, it becomes a data security or a privacy concern if the data is being used in ways that weren't intended. So for instance, if somebody were to hack an innovation or a system, that's an unintended purpose of that innovation, but it is a data concern or some type of risk involved. Right? That is pretty much the presentation. I also wanted to mention to you all that in the PDF links, there is a link to the a blank written response template if you wanted to use that, either, or you can use just a Google Doc and just, you know, lay it out as 2A through 2E. One more thing I wanted to mention in that as well, I also added a graphic organizer for you all during the research process. So if you wanted to use that to help you figure out what's a good innovation. All right. And that is pretty much it. I'm sorry I went over 3 minutes. Does anyone have any particular questions at this moment?
Jackie, I have a response to a question about the pictures. And for the student that asked about the artifact, I am actually getting ready to post that link to the example. It is pictures and no words about the artifact. And that it's 2017 example C.
Example C, okay, 2006. Did you put that link somewhere? Is that what it was?
It's coming up right now.
Oh, okay, gotcha, sorry. Yeah, do you have to use wording or captions? You do not. That is where 2B comes into play. 2B is asks that a student writes and explains kind of the process of creating the computational artifact. In addition, you can explain what is on the artifact itself. But I've also seen people put captions, small little quick captions on there too. So I think either way is doable.
And then we also had a question about the Explore task being required for the 2020-21 school year. I know there's been some changes coming, so.
Right. Some of those changes, as for the year 2020-21, excuse me, 2020-21, as far as I know, looking at the college updates, College Board updates, the Explore is, there is not a component of the Explore in terms of the digital portfolio. However, the Explore will show up in the multiple choice, similar like a reading passage with, you know, a number or a range of questions that pertain to that reading passage. And that it's basically kind of like what they are using to as a replacement for the Explore.
And all of those very specific updates are going to be coming out in June of 2020. So we will see all of the details then.
Yeah.
Well, if there are no other questions, I've got my screen shared with all of our contact information. Very special thank you to Jackie, Sherry, and Monique here for joining us today. If you have any follow-up questions for any of us, feel free to shoot us an email, give us a follow. We will get right back to you. The handouts that you all use today will stay on that Bitly link, so please make sure you're utilizing that if you need to, along with the sign-in sheets. I think that's all, unless you all have any other closing remarks. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
See you all later.